I mean, isn't that amazing? To me, that's a good deal. You know what I mean? It's a very good deal. God, you know what? I am going to follow your decrees. I am going to be obedient to tithe. I am going to serve in the house because I know what you can do in my life. So, also in this passage, in Leviticus 26, or the first part of 26, it actually is a guideline or an outline, step-by-step process on how we can actually achieve prosperity in our life. How many of you guys want a life that is prosperous? Yes. Everybody should be raising their hand. Yes. Completely, because that's what God wants for you. He wants to bless you. He does. Yes. He wants to bless you. What a good God we serve. Yes. It says in actually verse 4, let me look at it. In verse 4, it says, I will send you the seasonal rains. The land will then yield its crops, and the trees of the field will produce their fruit. Your threshing season will overlap with the grape harvest, and your grape harvest will overlap with the season of planting grain. You will eat your fill and live securely in your land. Guys, this is something that you guys really, really need to understand tonight, is that when we obey him, these are the blessings that we get. But more so than anything, I want to dig deeper into this passage because this is what he is instructing us to do in this word. As you can see right here, it says, I will send rain in your season, meaning that you need to plant some seed so that when God brings the rain, there's going to be a harvest. If there's no seed in the ground, it's going to turn into muddy water. You have to plant seed to get a harvest. And when God says, I bring rain in your season, then that's what he's going to do. He's going to rain on your seed so that you can experience that harvest. He also says, the land will yield its crops. I want you guys to know why he says the land and not your land. The reason why he doesn't say your land is because not everybody has land. Back in Bible times, the masters owned the land. And there were servants and maidservants that worked for him. But the master owned the land. There are only a certain amount of people that own the land. But in this new covenant, God has actually given us all the opportunity to have land. So he wants you to have land. So it's not somebody else getting the measure of blessing that he is saying here. And he actually gets into how he says the land, how important the land is. And the reason why I want to explain how important the land is because land is your opportunity. Yes. Land is your source of income. Yes. Land is your provision. Land is probably the most important thing you can have to govern financially. And the reason being is because if you have one source in your land, that's the only source that you're going to be able to depend on. That's it. And so actually, he says specifically, he says grain. He says, where am I? Sorry. He says grain. He says yield of crops. There's fruit. He's talking about a grape vineyard. Those are 3 right there, maybe 4 sources of income in your land. Right. So this is what God is saying in that specific text right there. He's saying to own multiple resources, to own multiple investments, to own multiple sources of income. Why? Because later in the passage, you're going to see how that comes together, how the blessing of God that God wants to flow through you has everything to do with your land. So you have to make a way for God to provide. Yeah. I'm not coming against people who work one job or I'm not trying to come against that at all. What I'm saying is that you have to give God the ability to bless your life. Yeah. And the more resources that you give him, the bigger measure of blessing that you're going to get. And so if we can manage and motivate ourselves and figure out a way to start multiple sources of income, God's going to bless our lives. And so that's what I think is absolutely crucial to living a life of prosperity. So in modern times, or in our times, what this completely represents is business. Start multiple businesses. Have investments. Do something on the side. Men and women, husbands and wives. It's important for both of you guys. I know Proverbs 31 clearly talks about the wife and how she works. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Actually, Ecclesiastes 11:6 says, sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let your hands not be idle. For you never know which ones will succeed. That's the purpose of it right there. It's to give God the opportunity to bring some provision to your land. So if you have multiple streams of income, you don't know which one's going to get a huge blessing. You don't know. Plus, in times like this, God knows that there are going to be famines, that there are going to be recessions, that there are going to be a ton of things that are going to happen to your life. And this is why he instructs it. It's because he knows that if you only depend on one source and you're living paycheck to paycheck, then you know what? You're living in a place where God is enabled to bless you. Do you see the importance of creating multiple sources? That's why, because God wants to flow things through you. Yes, he does. And if you're enabling him, he's not going to be able to. All right? So, he also talks about overlapping. Your harvest will overlap, right? Yeah. Well, you need to give him something to overlap. You know what I mean? I want, right now I am sowing. I'm in a position, my wife's a pastor, but I own 3 companies. Now, I don't say that to brag, but I say that because I want to prepare every little opportunity for God to bless me in my season so that my harvest will overlap each other. And you know what? I am going to steward and I'm going to sow faithfully until that day comes. Because I believe with all of my heart that it is. Yeah, that's right. Plus, I don't know which one's going to succeed. So I might as well start 20 of them, right? So when you start getting into developing multiple streams of income, when you start getting into owning multiple businesses or starting businesses or sowing different investments or doing things on the side, there's going to be a certain level of risk that you're entering into. There's going to be responsibilities that you're going to bear that you've never done before. These are all good things. Yes. Very good things. When you're taking care of a bunch of responsibilities and people are dependent on you and deals need to come through so your life is actually going to increase to the next level, that's a good thing. That's what we call faith. That is what God wants us to enter into.